It has been a year and a half since the pandemic began. It goes without saying that nearly all aspects of human life were affected by this catastrophe. Hospitals all across the world were overwhelmed with patients needing immediate medical care. The economies of many countries fell into a slump. The quality of education also fell as direct contact was prohibited, resulting in a massive migration to a fully online learning system. That being said, will the pandemic last forever? It most definitely wouldn't. We couldn't just sit around. We need to prepare, not only to restore our lives just like before the pandemic, but to improve them. That applies to education too. Of course, we shouldn't abandon the tools we are currently using for online learning. Why don't we put them into good use instead? Good morning to all the honorable judges. I am Yulius Ramahalim, and in this opportunity, I would like to talk about how we should utilize innovative blended learning for greater education access in the post-pandemic era. First things first, what is blended learning? To put it simply, blended learning is a learning approach that combines the strengths of online learning and face-to-face offline learning. There are several reasons why blended learning outshines both fully offline and fully online learning. A fear of mine is that reverting to a fully offline system will cause educators and students to become once again dependent on direct instruction. If certain events in the future render us unable to meet face-to-face, we will face the same crisis of having to remigrate back to technology-based education. Blended learning improves upon online learning by providing a solution to some of its biggest concerns: the lack of interaction between students and their educators and peers, as well as the lack of hands-on practice. Having an adequate amount of offline instruction will solve both of these problems. On the other hand, the online portion of blended learning will reduce the time needed to cover learning materials in the classroom. Instead, students can go over the provided content at their own pace. Of course, simply mashing together offline and online learning wouldn't produce a great education system based on blended learning. There are several problems we, as educators, students, and academicians, need to solve to maximize the potential of blended learning. One of the challenges we will eventually face in blended learning is getting an offline-online balance. Too much online time will result in students being unengaged, as most practice and application is done during the offline portion. On the contrary, too much online time might be an inconvenience to teachers and students with long travel times. Thus, a continuous evaluation is needed to ensure a healthy balance between the two. As for teachers and educators, they say, there are two sides to every coin. For example, some educators who have less experience with technology might encounter problems during blended learning. On the flip side, instructors who are more comfortable with digital resources can use a vast amount of learning materials and assessments at their disposal. If used wisely, it can tremendously benefit learners. However, students may experience cognitive load if said teachers overdo it with educational activities and content. It's clear that blended learning costs less than typical face-to-face learning. Travel fees can be cut, study and work environments become paperless. The lower cost is indeed a significant benefit of blended learning that helps increase the reach of education, which we'll cover soon. However, the lower expenses of blended learning should not be a reason for schools and universities to start cutting corners. Just like in offline classes, educational institutions need to invest time, attention, and money in implementing blended learning. An example is creating high-quality digital assets to use during online instruction. Furthermore, schools with a higher budget could more easily customize their resources to cater to the needs of individual students. Aside from high-quality education, another important point to note in the post-pandemic era is ensuring greater education access. Can we make blended learning a tool to broaden the reach of education, especially in a developing country such as ours? And if so, how? The answer lies in the accessibility of blended learning. The lower cost of operating a blended learning system makes it possible to deliver education to less developed areas. Of course, there's a proverb that nothing good happens fast. It will take some time to introduce technology to the people there and accustom them to it. However, the results are quite enticing. With this approach, education can be established in rural areas and areas with difficult access to education. Blended learning also brings us one step closer towards education equity and equality. Blended learning will give people in remote schools and universities access to high-quality teachers and resources, which are usually only available to the top schools and universities. This will reduce disparity in education due to financial and social issues. As George Couros, an innovative teaching, learning, and leadership consultant once said, "Technology will not replace great teachers, but technology in the hands of great teachers can be transformational." For the past few minutes, I've talked about how we can utilize the power of technology with blended learning to take the best of both worlds from both online and offline learning. Now we know about some of the challenges we are going to face: online-offline balance, technological literacy, cognitive load, and the alluring lower cost that tempts us to cut corners. We have also covered how blended learning can broaden education access across the globe. Finally, I'd like to ask all the audience, including our honorable judges, to imagine our society in the future, after the pandemic has ended. Let us imagine a world that has adopted blended learning to its maximum potential. How many hours of commuting can we save? How much more engaged can we make the students? How many educators and students can we make more tech literate? How many more students can we reach in the remote and less developed areas of the country? The sky is the limit. Let's all march together towards the future of education with blended learning. Thank you.